The O'Hare International Airport buzzed with the frenetic pulse of a Friday afternoon, a chaotic symphony of rolling suitcases, crackling intercoms, and hurried footsteps echoing off the polished floors. Dorothy Dot Jackson, a sharp-eyed black woman of 70, navigated the throng with a quiet grace, her faded wool coat brushing against her husband Leroy's arm. At 72, Leroy carried himself with a scholar's poise, his silver hair catching the harsh, fluorescent lights, his wire-rimmed glasses glinting as he scanned the signs for WindStar Airlines' first-class gate. Their modest attire, Dot's sensible loafers, Leroy's worn leather jacket, belied the power they held, a secret buried beneath decades of grit and triumph. They were the unseen founders of WindStar, a legacy they'd built from nothing, now returning to Chicago to face a boardroom storm threatening to unravel it. Dot clutched two pristine boarding passes, her weathered fingers steady despite the ache in her joints. She'd faced worse than crowded terminals, decades of slights, dismissals, and doors slammed shut because of her skin. Today was no different, yet the air felt heavier, charged with an unspoken challenge. As they approached Gate C-12, a young flight attendant, Megan Carter, stood like a sentinel, her blonde ponytail swinging as she scanned the crowd, with a practiced smile that didn't reach her blue eyes. Megan's crisp WindStar uniform hugged her frame, her badge gleaming with false authority. Spotting Dot and Leroy, her lips curled into a smirk, and she stepped forward, blocking their path. "Economy's that way, folks," Megan said, her voice sharp and syrupy, pointing toward a distant gate. "Let's keep the line moving." The words landed like a slap, drawing curious glances from nearby passengers. A white businessman in a pinstripe suit, a harried mother juggling a stroller, a teenage boy with earbuds dangling. Dot's chest tightened, not from surprise but from the familiar sting of being sized up and found wanting. She met Megan's gaze, her brown eyes unyielding, and slid the boarding passes across the counter. "We're first class," Dot said evenly, her tone a quiet challenge. Megan's smirk faltered for a split second before hardening. She snatched the tickets, barely glancing at the bold print. Dorothy Jackson, Leroy Jackson, first class, seat 1A, 1B, before tossing them back with a flick of her wrist. "Nice try," she said, loud enough for the growing crowd to hear. "These look fake. You're not fooling anyone." Her voice dripped with condescension, her pale cheeks flushing as she leaned forward. "First class isn't for, well, you know." The implication hung in the air, raw and deliberate. The businessman snickered, muttering, "They're delusional," while the mother averted her eyes, her silence a betrayal of its own. Dot's pulse quickened, her mind racing through decades of battles, courtrooms, picket lines, boardrooms where she'd been the only black face. She squared her shoulders, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "Check them again," she said, sliding the passes back. "We're exactly where we belong." Megan's eyes narrowed, her fingers twitching as if resisting the urge to tear the tickets apart. Instead, she barked, "Security! We've got a problem at Gate 12. The crowd swelled, phones emerging to capture the spectacle, a modern coliseum ready to cheer or jeer. The air at Gate C-12 thickened with hostility, the crowd's murmurs rising like a tide as Megan Carter's call for security echoed through the terminal. Dot Jackson stood firm, her sharp brown eyes locked on Megan, refusing to flinch under the weight of the flight attendant's sneer. Leroy beside her adjusted his glasses, his silence a coiled spring, his dark gaze piercing Megan with an intensity she couldn't yet fathom. The boarding passes lay untouched on the counter, a silent testament to their truth. But Megan's hand hovered over her radio, her voice rising with theatrical flair. "Hurry up! We've got trespassers trying to sneak into first class," she snapped, her words slicing through the clamor of O'Hare's chaos. The businessman in the pinstripe suit clapped slowly, his smirk widening as he muttered, "Send them to the back where they belong." A teenage boy's phone flashed red, streaming the scene live, his grin hungry for drama. Dot's heart pounded, not from fear, but from the absurdity of it all, her dignity under siege in a place she'd built with her own hands. She felt the familiar burn of being reduced to her skin, her coat, her age, assumptions piling up like bricks around her. Yet she stood taller, her voice crisp as she leaned forward. "Call your supervisor now," she said, each word a blade cutting through Megan's bravado. Megan's grin twisted, her ponytail swinging as she scoffed. "I don't need a supervisor to spot a scam. Look at you. Cheap shoes, no jewelry. First class?" She laughed, sharp and brittle, her hand waving at their worn attire. The crowd's jeers swelled. A woman in a red scarf muttering, "Always causing trouble." A young man in a hoodie nodding, "Get him out." Two burly security guards pushed through, their navy uniforms stark against the neon glow of the gate. Their boots thudded, hands grazing their holsters as they sized up Dot and Leroy. "What's the issue?" one guard asked, scratching his jaw, his brow furrowing as he glanced at the tickets. Megan pointed, her nails clicking against the counter. "Fake tickets, fake story. They're nobodies. Deal with them." But Dot's jaw clenched, her mind flashing to the countless times she'd been dismissed, underestimated, her legacy buried under the arrogance of people like Megan. "You're making a mistake," she said, her tone calm but laced with steel. "Check the list." The second guard hesitated, reaching for the passes, his fingers brushing the paper as he squinted at the names. "Jackson, huh?" he muttered, his radio crackling as he stepped back. "Hang on, something's off." Megan rolled her eyes, folding her arms. "What's off is them thinking they can pull this," she hissed, oblivious to the storm she'd unleashed. Unseen in the crowd, a young black flight attendant, Tasha Brooks, lingered near a coffee kiosk, her phone discreetly recording, her heart racing as she recognized Dot's name from whispered company lore. Dot caught Tasha's eye for a fleeting moment, a spark of hope in the chaos. Leroy's hand brushed Dot's, a silent anchor as the supervisor's footsteps echoed closer, a faint lifeline in the swelling tide of scorn. Dot braced herself, knowing this gate was just the first battle in a war she hadn't chosen, but would damn well finish. The hum of the WindStar Airlines jet filled the first-class cabin as it climbed out of Chicago's O'Hare, bound for Seattle, the late afternoon sun glinting off the wings. Dorothy Dot Jackson settled into the plush leather of seat 1A, her sharp brown eyes scanning the cabin, still stinging from the confrontation at gate C12. Her faded coat was stowed overhead, but the weight of Megan Carter's scorn clung to her like damp wool. Beside her, Leroy Jackson adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, his silver hair catching the overhead light as he flipped through a worn paperback. His calm, a quiet shield against the storm Dot felt brewing. They'd won the battle at the gate. Supervisor Tim had confirmed their tickets after Megan's tantrum, his flustered apology barely masking his embarrassment. But Dot knew better than to trust a victory so easily won. Megan's venom had been too sharp, too personal, to fade with a single rebuke. The cabin was a cocoon of privilege, soft jazz piped through hidden speakers, crystal glasses clinking as a businessman 2 rows back ordered a scotch. Yet Dot felt exposed, every glance from a passenger a potential judgment. She smoothed her skirt, her fingers brushing a faint coffee stain from a spill years ago, a reminder of battles past. Megan emerged from the galley, her blonde ponytail swinging, her smile a polished mask that didn't reach her blue eyes. She moved with purpose, her heels clicking like a metronome, pausing at Dot's row with a tray of drinks. "Sparkling water, ma'am?" Megan asked, her voice syrupy, but her gaze flicked over Dot's modest blouse, her lips twitching with disdain. Dot nodded, her throat tight, sensing the trap in Megan's courtesy. As Megan poured, her hand jerked, deliberately Dot was sure, sending a stream of ice-cold water splashing across Dot's lap. The chills soaked through her skirt, biting her thighs, and Dot gasped, her hands flying to the mess. "Oh my goodness, I'm so clumsy," Megan cooed, her tone dripping with mockery as she dabbed at the spill with a napkin, her nails grazing Dot's knee. "Guess I figured you'd be used to rougher seats, huh?" The businessman snorted, his chuckle a knife twist, while a young woman with hoop earrings giggled, whispering, "Should have stayed in coach." Dot's face burned, not from the cold, but from the public shaming, her dignity a target once again. She caught Leroy's gaze, his jaw tightening, his book forgotten. "Get a towel," he said, his deep voice low but firm, a warning Megan ignored as she sauntered off, her hips swaying with triumph. Dot dabbed at her skirt, her mind racing, decades of slights flashing before her, from Jim Crow buses to boardrooms where her voice was dismissed. This wasn't just a spill, it was a declaration of war, Megan's way of saying they didn't belong, no matter what the tickets read. Dot Jackson's hands trembled as she pressed the damp napkin against her skirt, the icy sting of the spilled water fading into a deeper fire, a rage kindled by Megan Carter's calculated cruelty. The first-class cabin of the WindStar jet seemed to close in, the soft clink of glasses and hum of conversation now a mocking backdrop to her humiliation. Leroy leaned closer, his silver hair brushing her shoulder, his deep voice a whisper meant only for her. "She's baiting us, Dot. Don't give her the satisfaction." His words were steady, but his knuckles whitened around his paperback, the pages creased under his grip. Dot nodded, her sharp brown eyes flicking to Megan, who lingered near the galley, her blonde ponytail swaying as she chatted with another flight attendant, her smirk barely concealed. A flicker of movement caught Dot's attention. A young black flight attendant, Tasha Brooks, emerged from the galley with a stack of fresh towels. Unlike Megan, Tasha's eyes held a quiet empathy, her uniform slightly wrinkled, as if she'd rushed to help. She approached Dot's row, her voice soft but firm. "Here, ma'am, let me fix this." Tasha handed Dot a warm towel, her fingers brushing Dot's with a fleeting warmth that felt like solidarity. Dot murmured a thank you, her chest loosening slightly, but she noticed Tasha glance nervously at Megan, who shot her a withering look before turning away. That glance told Dot everything. Megan ruled this cabin like a petty tyrant, and Tasha was risking something by defying her. As Dot dried her skirt, a shadow fell across her seat. Calvin Hayes, a wiry man in his late 60s with a salt and pepper beard, stood in the aisle, his tweed blazer out of place among the sleek suits of first class. His eyes widened with recognition, a grin breaking across his face. "Dorothy Jackson? Lord, it's been, 40 years?" Dot froze, her mind racing back to Chicago's South Side, to smoky union halls where she and Calvin had fought for fair wages as young airline workers. She managed a faint smile, her voice low. "Calvin, didn't expect you here." He chuckled, oblivious to the tension, but his presence stirred a warmth she hadn't felt since the gate. "We'll catch up," he promised, returning to his seat as Megan's heels clicked closer. Megan reappeared, her tray now empty, her smile sharper than before. She leaned in, her breath hot against Dot's ear. "Enjoy your little moment," she hissed, too low for others to hear. "You don't belong here, and I'll make sure everyone knows it." Dot's pulse thundered, her resolve hardening as Megan strutted off, her parting glance a vow of worse to come. Dot exchanged a look with Leroy, his nod a silent pact. They'd face this together, as always. But as the plane leveled off, Dot's gaze drifted to Tasha, who was slipping a phone into her pocket, her expression unreadable. Something was brewing, and Dot sensed it wasn't just Megan's spite. The real storm was waiting, coiled and unseen, ready to strike before they touched down in Seattle. The WindStar Airlines jet cruised at 35,000 feet, its engines a steady hum that did little to ease the knot in Dorothy Jackson's chest. The first-class cabin, with its muted lighting and clinking glasses, felt like a stage set for a trap. Megan Carter's whispered threat, "I'll make sure everyone knows it," still ringing in Dot's ears. She sat in seat 1A, her skirt now dry but stiff from the water spill, her sharp brown eyes scanning every movement. Leroy Jackson beside her paged through his paperback with deliberate calm, his silver hair glinting under the overhead light. But Dot caught the tension in his jaw, his glasses slipping slightly as he stole glances at the galley. The memory of Megan's sneer at O'Hare's gate and her deliberate spill fueled Dot's unease. This flight was no sanctuary, but a battlefield. Megan emerged from the galley, her blonde ponytail bouncing, her smile a razor-thin facade as she pushed a cart down the aisle. Her blue eyes flicked to Dot and Leroy, lingering with a predator's glint, and Dot braced herself, sensing the next blow. Across the cabin, Calvin Hayes, the old friend who'd recognized Dot earlier, sipped a coffee, oblivious to the storm brewing. Tasha Brooks, the young flight attendant who'd offered a towel, hovered near the bulkhead, her expression guarded as she polished a tray. Dot noted Tasha's quick glance at Megan, fearful yet defiant, and wondered what loyalty or dread tethered her to this crew. Halfway through the flight, the intercom crackled, and Megan's voice sliced through the cabin's calm, shrill, and accusing. "Attention passengers, we have a situation. Someone's wallet is missing, and I saw who took it." Heads whipped around, the businessman 2 rows back gasping. "What the hell?" Megan strode to Dot and Leroy's row, her heels clicking like gunfire, and pointed at Leroy's carry-on. "I saw him slip it in there," she declared, her voice loud enough to carry the coach. The cabin erupted, passengers craning their necks, a young woman with hoop earrings clutching her purse as she hissed, "I knew they didn't belong here." Dot's heart slammed against her ribs, her mind racing as Leroy's hand tightened on his book. "That's a lie," she snapped, her voice cutting through the din. "He didn't touch a thing." But Megan's smirk widened, her hand already reaching for Leroy's bag. "Let's see then," she said, unzipping it with a flourish to reveal a sleek leather wallet nestled among his books, a damning prop in her twisted play. The businessman shouted, "Kick them out. I don't feel safe," while a teenage boy across the aisle filmed, his phone shaking as he muttered, "This is wild." Dot's rage flared, her 70 years of battling prejudice boiling over as she realized Megan had escalated from humiliation to sabotage, a calculated strike to ruin them mid-flight. The first-class cabin of the WindStar jet crackled with chaos, Megan Carter's accusation, "I saw him slip it in there," igniting a firestorm of whispers and glares. Dot Jackson stood, her sharp brown eyes boring into Megan, who clutched the planted wallet like a trophy, her blonde ponytail swaying as she faced the crowd's growing fury. Leroy remained seated, his silver hair catching the cabin's dim light, his deep voice rumbling, "You planted that." We all know it. But the passengers weren't listening, their fear and bias drowning out reason. The businessman bellowed, "Thieves don't belong here," while the young woman with hoop earrings nodded, her phone now filming alongside the teenage boys, their lenses capturing Dot and Leroy's humiliation for a digital mob. Dot's pulse thundered, her 70 years of resilience surging as she grabbed Leroy's bag, yanking the wallet free. She flipped it open, revealing a photo of a white man in a golf shirt, nothing linking it to Leroy. "This isn't his," she said, holding it high, her voice a whip cracking through the noise. "Look at it. She set us up." She turned to Megan, whose smirk faltered for a split second, her blue eyes darting to the galley. Dot's mind raced, recalling Tasha Brooks's nervous glance earlier, and she spotted the young flight attendant now, lingering near the curtain, her phone half hidden in her palm, its red light blinking subtly. Tasha was recording, Dot was sure of it, a lifeline Dot couldn't yet grasp, but clung to like a prayer. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, stern but strained. "This is your captain. We've got a report of theft. Stay calm. We're handling it." Megan seized the moment, her voice rising. "He must have grabbed it earlier. He's sneaky," she insisted, pointing at Leroy, who adjusted his glasses, his calm a stark contrast to her hysteria. Dot's hands steadied as she pulled out her own phone, her fingers trembling but precise as she opened a photo she'd snapped during the water spill. And blurry shot of Megan's hand brushing Leroy's bag, the timestamp damningly close to takeoff. "Here's your thief," Dot said, shoving the screen toward Megan, whose cheeks flushed crimson. "You touched his bag. Explain that." The captain emerged from the cockpit, his gray hair slick with sweat, his eyes darting between Dot and Megan. He snatched the wallet, examining the photo inside, his frown deepening. "This doesn't add up," he muttered, then turned to Dot's phone, studying her evidence. Megan stammered, "That's edited." "They're liars." But the captain's jaw tightened, his voice low. "Enough. We're sorting this now." He addressed the cabin. "False alarm, folks. Sit down." Dot exhaled, sinking into her seat, her legs shaky as Leroy squeezed her hand, whispering, "Good move." But Megan's retreat to the galley wasn't defeat. Her heels clicked with purpose, her muttered words to a coworker barely audible. "They won't get away with this." Dot's relief curdled, her sharp mind sensing the accusation wasn't dead. It was morphing, coiling for a deadlier strike when they landed in Seattle. The WindStar Airlines jet touched down at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport with a jolt, the screech of tires on tarmac slicing through the uneasy quiet of the first-class cabin. Dorothy Jackson gripped the armrest, her sharp brown eyes darting to the window, where the dusk sky bled orange over the runway. The sting of Megan Carter's false theft accusation still burned, though Dot's quick thinking, flashing that photo of Megan tampering with Leroy's bag, had silenced the cabin's uproar. Leroy sat beside her, his silver hair disheveled, his wire-rimmed glasses fogged as he folded his paperback, his deep voice low. "She's not done, Dot. Watch your back." Dot nodded, her 70-year-old frame taut, the damp spot on her skirt from Megan's earlier spill, a badge of battles fought and won, barely. As the seatbelt sign dimmed, passengers stirred, grabbing bags with restless energy. But Dot felt the air shift, heavy with a new threat. Megan's parting words, "They won't get away with this," echoed in her mind, a promise of retaliation Dot couldn't yet see. She caught a glimpse of Tasha Brooks, the young flight attendant who'd slipped her a towel, lingering near the galley, her phone tucked away but her eyes wide with something like dread. Across the aisle, Calvin Hayes, Dot's old friend from Chicago's Union days, gathered his tweed blazer, flashing her a reassuring grin. "You handled that like a pro, Dorothy," he said, oblivious to the storm brewing beyond the jet bridge. The cabin door hissed open, and 4 police officers stormed aboard, their boots thudding, badges glinting under the cabin lights. The lead cop, a burly man with a buzz cut and a sneer to rival Megan's, barked, "Dorothy Jackson, Leroy Jackson, step forward. You're under arrest for disorderly conduct and theft." Dot's heart slammed against her ribs, her mind reeling as passengers gasped, the businessman from earlier nodding smugly. "About time." Megan emerged from the galley, her blonde ponytail swinging, her smirk a silent victory as she leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed. The teenage boy whipped out his phone again, filming with a shaky grin, while the young woman with hoop earrings muttered, "Told you they were trouble." Dot stood, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "This is a setup. Check your facts before you touch us." She clutched her phone, the photo of Megan's hand in Leroy's bag, burning a hole in her pocket. Leroy rose beside her, his tall frame steady, his deep voice calm but firm. "You're making a mistake." The lead cop's hand hovered over his cuffs, his eyes narrowing. "We've got a witness, lady. Save it for the station." Dot's pulse thundered, her sharp mind racing. She'd thought exposing Megan's wallet stunt had bought them time. But this was no random escalation. Megan's smugness, the cop's haste, it reeked of a larger hand pulling strings, one Dot hadn't yet named but felt closing in. The first-class cabin of the WindStar jet crackled with tension, the police officers' boots scuffing the carpet as they loomed over Dorothy Jackson and Leroy Jackson. Dot's sharp brown eyes locked onto the lead cop's sneer, her 70-year-old frame rigid with defiance, despite the chaos swirling around her. Leroy stood beside her, his silver hair catching the cabin's dim glow, his deep voice a low rumble as he repeated, "You're making a mistake." The lead cop scoffed, his meaty fingers twitching toward his cuffs. But Dot's mind was a storm of calculation. She knew this arrest wasn't just Megan Carter's revenge. The flight attendant's smirk, gleaming from the galley, was too triumphant, too assured, as if she held a winning hand dealt by someone far more dangerous. Dot's hand slipped into her pocket, clutching her phone, the photo of Megan tampering with Leroy's bag her only shield. "Look at this," she said, thrusting the screen toward the cop, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "She framed us. That's your witness." The blurry image showed Megan's hand brushing Leroy's carry-on, the timestamp damningly precise. The cop's eyes narrowed, swiping the screen, his frown deepening as he studied the evidence. Behind him, Megan's smirk faltered, her blonde ponytail twitching as she stepped forward, stammering, "That's edited. They're liars." But Dot pressed closer, her gaze piercing. "Check the bag's zipper," she said. "Her fingerprints are on it, not ours." The second officer, a wiry man with a mustache, grabbed Leroy's carry-on, his gloved fingers tracing the zipper's metal teeth. He nodded slowly, his voice low. She's right. No prints from him. The lead cop's jaw tightened, his radio crackling as he muttered, "Hold up. We've got something here." He waved his team back, the cuffs staying on their belts, and Dot exhaled, her legs trembling as she sank into her seat. Leroy's hand found hers, his whisper fierce. "You nailed it." The cabin fell silent, passengers shifting awkwardly, the businessman's smugness fading, the teenage boy's phone dipping as the drama fizzled. Megan's retreat was anything but surrender. Her heels dragged, her blue eyes burning with a fury Dot hadn't anticipated. As the cops dispersed, their boots echoing down the jet bridge, Calvin Hayes pushed through the aisle, his tweed blazer rumpled, his voice urgent. "Dorothy, you okay? That was too close." Dot nodded, her chest still tight, but her sharp mind caught a flicker of movement. Tasha Brooks, slipping her phone into her pocket, her expression unreadable, but her eyes locked on Megan's back. Dot faced Megan, now alone by the galley, and said, "You'll pay for this." Megan's laugh was brittle, her whisper venomous. "You think you've won? This is just the start." The words landed like a stone, heavy with promise, and Dot realized the real fight wasn't with Megan. It was with whoever had sent her, a shadow waiting to strike when they least expected it. The Seattle night pressed against the hotel room's windows, a damp chill seeping through the glass as Dorothy, Dot Jackson, sat on the edge of the bed, her sharp brown eyes tracing the faint coffee stain on her skirt. A relic of Megan Carter's spite now joined by the fresh weight of the police ambush at SeaTac. Her 70-year-old hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the fury of being hunted in a world she'd helped build. Leroy Jackson paced the room, his silver hair catching the lamplight. His wire-rimmed glasses fogged as he clutched his phone, his deep voice low and urgent. "That wasn't just Megan, Dot. Someone's pulling her strings." The cops' retreat after Dot's evidence had bought them a moment's breath, but the sting of Megan's final threat, "This is just the start," lingered like smoke after a fire. Dot nodded, her mind churning through decades of battles, from picket lines to boardrooms, where her skin marked her as an outsider. The wallet stunt, the arrest attempt, it was too coordinated, too vicious for a flight attendant's petty grudge. She glanced at her phone, expecting a message from Tasha Brooks, the young attendant who'd recorded Megan's antics. But the screen was dark. A soft knock broke the silence, and Dot tensed, her pulse quickening as Leroy opened the door. Calvin Hayes stood there, his tweed blazer rumpled, his salt and pepper beard framing a worried grin. "You two holding up?" he asked, stepping inside. "I saw the cops leave, but that girl's trouble ain't done." Calvin's presence stirred memories of Chicago's South Side, of fighting for fair wages beside him 40 years ago. But Dot's focus snapped back when her phone buzzed. A text from Tasha, cryptic and rushed. "Megan's meeting someone big. Check your email." Dot's fingers flew, opening a forwarded message from Tasha's WindStar account, a grainy photo attached. Megan in a terminal corner, whispering to a man in a tailored suit, his face half hidden, but his posture radiating power. The email's subject line read, "Victor Ramsey's orders." Dot's breath caught. Victor, WindStar's operations chief, a man who'd climbed the ranks on ambition and resentment, his disdain for her and Leroy's ownership a poorly kept secret. "Victor," Dot whispered, the name a stone in her gut. Leroy stopped pacing, his glasses slipping as he leaned over her shoulder, his voice tight. "He's been gunning for us since we stepped back." Calvin's eyes widened, his voice low. "Ramsey, I heard he's been cozying up to board members, talking takeover." Dot's sharp mind raced. Victor's hand explained Megan's boldness, the cop's haste. She dialed Elena Torres, their lawyer, her voice firm despite the hour. "Elena, dig into Victor Ramsey. He's behind this." Elena's reply was crisp. "On it. Stay safe. This smells like a war." As Dot hung up, a new alert flashed on her phone. A baggage claim error. Their luggage sent to Texas. No explanation given. Her jaw clenched, sensing Victor's reach tightening around them. Jackson's sharp brown eyes flicked from her phone's baggage error alert to the hotel room's dim corners, the Seattle skyline beyond the window now a blur of neon and shadow. The revelation of Victor Ramsey's involvement, his whispered meeting with Megan Carter captured in Tasha Brooks' grainy photo, had turned Dot's suspicion into certainty. This wasn't just a flight attendant's vendetta. It was a calculated strike from WindStar's operations chief, a man whose tailored suits masked a hunger to seize the airline she and Leroy had built from nothing. Leroy sat beside her, his silver hair mussed, his wire-rimmed glasses resting on the nightstand as he rubbed his temples. "Victor's playing chess," he murmured, his deep voice heavy with the weight of betrayal. "And we're the pieces he wants off the board." Calvin Hayes lingered by the door, his tweed blazer slung over a chair, his salt and pepper beard framing a frown. "I knew Ramsey was slick," he said, his Chicago drawl thick with disgust. "But this? Setting you up with cops? Losing your bags? He's got no shame." Dot's 70-year-old frame tensed, her mind flashing to boardroom battles where Victor's smiles hid barbs, his comments about modernizing WindStar a veiled jab at their legacy. She opened Tasha's email again, zooming in on the photo. Victor's hand on Megan's shoulder, her smirk mirroring his. "He's using her to do his dirty work," Dot said, her voice low but sharp. "But why now?" Her phone buzzed again, another message from Tasha, this one a voice clip. Dot played it, Tasha's hushed tone crackling through static. "Megan bragged about Ramsey promising her a promotion if she handled you. Be careful, he's got eyes everywhere." The clip cut off, leaving a silence that felt like a held breath. Dot exchanged a look with Leroy, his nod a silent vow. They'd outsmart this snake, just as they'd outlasted every obstacle before. Calvin stepped closer, his voice urgent. "You got a plan, Dorothy, 'cause Ramsey ain't stopping at lost luggage." Dot's lips twitched, a faint smile born of grit. "We start with proof," she said, texting Elena Torres to trace Victor's digital fingerprints. A flicker of light caught Dot's eye. The hotel TV, left on mute, now flashing Victor's face in a late-night news segment. She grabbed the remote, unmuting it, and his smooth voice filled the room, laced with venom. "WindStar's facing challenges from disruptive passengers. We're investigating claims of fraud." The screen cut to a blurred image of Dot and Leroy at O'Hare's gate. Megan's accusation twisted into a headline. "Couple suspected of scamming Airline." Dot's stomach dropped, her sharp mind racing. Victor was already spinning the narrative, painting them as villains to a public eager to judge. Leroy's hand tightened on hers, his voice a growl. "He's building a case to bury us." As Calvin cursed under his breath, Dot stood, her resolve hardening. Victor had drawn first blood, but she'd make damn sure he bled last. A fight that would start when they boarded their next flight, where his shadow loomed larger than ever. The Seattle-Tacoma airport buzzed with early morning travelers as Dorothy Jackson and Leroy Jackson stepped toward the WindStar Airlines check-in counter, their first-class tickets clutched tightly in Dot's weathered hand. The sting of Victor Ramsey's TV smear, branding them as scammers, burned hotter than the coffee stain still faint on Dot's skirt. A reminder of Megan Carter's cruelty, now amplified by a corporate puppet master. Dot's sharp brown eyes scanned the terminal, her 70-year-old frame taut with defiance, while Leroy adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, his silver hair catching the fluorescent glow, his deep voice low. "They're watching us, Dot. Stay sharp." The baggage sabotage, their luggage sent to Texas, had left them with only carry-ons. A petty jab Dot knew was Victor's doing, meant to wear them down before their return flight to Chicago. The terminal pulsed with chaos, announcements blaring, travelers lugging overstuffed bags. But Dot felt the weight of unseen eyes, Victor's influence lurking like a shadow. She'd spent the night on the phone with Elena Torres, their lawyer, who'd confirmed Victor's digital trail tied him to Megan's stunts. But the news cycle was already spiraling, social media flooded with hashtags like Russian WindStar scammers. Dot's chest tightened, her legacy twisted into a lie. Yet she squared her shoulders, whispering to Leroy, "We'll beat this, same as always." He nodded, his calm a quiet anchor, but his knuckles whitened around his bag strap, betraying the storm beneath. At the counter, Dot handed over their tickets, her voice firm. Jackson, first class. The agent, a young man with a nervous smile, typed rapidly, then froze, his eyes darting to the screen. Uh, there's an issue, he stammered. Your seats. They're showing economy now. Dot's pulse quickened, her sharp mind flashing to Victor's reach, hacking the system to humiliate them again. Before she could protest, Megan appeared behind the counter, her blonde ponytail swinging, her smirk sharp as a blade. Booking error, she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. Economy's got your new seats, folks. Better hurry. Passengers nearby turned, their stares heavy with judgment. A woman in a green sweater muttering, should have known they'd try again. A man in a baseball cap nodding, scammers. Dot's face burned, not from shame but from the orchestrated assault on their dignity. She leaned forward, her voice low and fierce. Check the system again. We paid for first class. Megan's eyes narrowed, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as if savoring the moment. System says economy, sweetie, she replied, loud enough for the crowd to hear. Move it. The agent shrank back, his hands trembling, caught in a war he didn't understand. Dot's mind raced. Victor's fingerprints were all over this, a public shaming to cement his lies before they could fight back. The WindStar Airlines check-in counter at Seattle-Tacoma Airport pulsed with tension. Megan Carter's taunt, system says economy, sweetie, hanging in the air like a gauntlet thrown at Dorothy Jackson's feet. Dot stood firm, her sharp brown eyes boring into Megan, her 70-year-old hands clutching the counter's edge as if anchoring herself against a rising tide of scorn. Leroy Jackson flanked her, his silver hair glinting under the terminal's harsh lights, his wire-rimmed glasses slipping as he leaned forward, his deep voice a low growl. Fix it now, or we're calling your boss. The crowd's murmurs swelled, a chorus of bias fed by Victor Ramsey's viral lies. Shock at WindStar scammers trending higher by the minute, their faces plastered across screens as frauds. Megan's smirk widened, her blonde ponytail twitching as she tapped the keyboard with theatrical slowness, her blue eyes gleaming with triumph. No mistake here, she said, her voice loud enough to draw more stares. You're holding up the line. Let's cheer you to the back, folks. A ripple of laughter broke out, the woman in the green sweater clapping, Go already, while the man in a baseball cap shouted, Stop wasting our time. Dot's chest burned, her legacy as WindStar's founder buried under their jeers. But she caught a flicker of movement. Tasha Brooks, the young flight attendant, lingering near a kiosk, her phone discreetly angled, capturing Megan's performance. Tasha's eyes met Dot's for a fleeting second, a silent promise Dot clung to. Dot pulled out her phone, dialing Elena Torres, her voice steady despite the chaos. Elena, they've downgraded us. Victor's hacked the system. Check the booking logs now. Elena's reply crackled through, urgent and fierce. Holy hell, he's deep in this. I'm overwriting it. Hang on. Minutes ticked by, the crowd's impatience boiling into hostility, a teenage girl with braids snapping, Just leave. Dot's sharp mind churned, piecing together Victor's plan, to humiliate them publicly, to make their ownership a punchline before they could reclaim it. Leroy's hand brushed hers, his whisper fierce. We're not moving. The agent's screen flickered, his nervous smile returning as he stammered, correction, Evans, Jackson party, first class confirmed. You're good. Megan's smirk vanished, her fingers freezing on the keyboard as the crowd groaned. The baseball cap guy muttering, Figures they'd weasel out. Dot sank into a nearby chair, her legs shaky, but her victory felt hollow. Megan's glare promised more to come. As they boarded, Calvin Hayes caught up, his tweed blazer flapping, his voice low. Dorothy, I found something. A memo from Ramsey pushing to sell WindStar. He's playing dirty. Dot's stomach twisted, the memo a spark to the fire Victor was stoking. She nodded, her resolve hardening, knowing the flight back to Chicago would be no refuge but a gauntlet, with Victor's lies fueling a mob ready to tear them apart when they landed at O'Hare. The WindStar Airlines jet screeched to a halt at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport, the Saturday morning sun barely piercing the terminal's glass as Dorothy Jackson stepped off the plane, her sharp brown eyes scanning the concourse. Her 70-year-old frame ached from the Seattle flight. Victor Ramsey's seat downgrade and media smear still raw wounds. But she gripped Leroy Jackson's arm, his silver hair catching the light, his wire-rimmed glasses steady despite the storm they'd endured. Their first-class seats reclaimed, thanks to Elena Torres' quick fix, felt like a hollow victory against the tidal wave of public hate Victor had unleashed. Social media burned with hashtag WindStar scammers, their faces vilified, and Calvin Hayes' memo about Victor's takeover plot weighed heavy in Dot's mind. A war declared in whispers now roaring to life. The terminal buzzed with weekend chaos, travelers hauling bags, announcements crackling overhead. But Dot sensed a shift, a current of malice cutting through the crowd. Leroy murmured, "They're here, Dot." "I feel it," his deep voice tight, his hand tightening on his carry-on. She nodded, her pulse quickening as they moved toward the exit. Their modest attire, Dot's faded coat, Leroy's worn jacket, drawing stares that felt like knives. Victor's lies had spread like wildfire, fueled by Megan Carter's accusations and his TV soundbites, turning strangers into judge and jury. Dot's chest burned, her legacy as WindStar's founder buried under a mob's blind rage. But she squared her shoulders, whispering, "We've faced worse." The first shout came like a gunshot. "There they are!" A burly man in a trucker hat surging forward, his face twisted with fury. "You don't belong here," he bellowed, his words dripping venom, echoing Victor's narrative. A crowd swelled behind him, dozens strong, their phones flashing, signs scrawled with "Thieves Out," and "No scammers in first class." Dot's breath hitched, her sharp mind racing as a woman in a denim jacket hurled a soda bottle, the plastic cracking against her shoulder, sticky liquid soaking her sleeve. She stumbled, Leroy's arm catching her, his glasses fogging with sweat as he shouted, "Back off!" The mob pressed closer, a teenage boy with a buzz cut spitting, "Liars! You stole those seats!" While a middle-aged woman with a cross necklace screamed, "You're a disgrace!" Dot's arm throbbed, blood seeping from a cut where a second bottle, this one glass, shattered against her elbow. She winced, her voice rising above the chaos. "We own this airline! Stop this!" But her words drowned in the roar, their phones turning her pain into a viral spectacle. Leroy shielded her, his tall frame a barrier as he pushed toward a service door. But a wiry man in a red cap swung a fist, grazing Leroy's jaw. Dot's rage flared, her 70 years of grit surging as she grabbed a fallen sign, wielding it like a shield. "You're wrong, all of you," she shouted, her defiance a beacon in the storm, knowing Victor's hand had lit this fuse, and it was burning towards something far worse. The concourse at O'Hare International Airport morphed into a battlefield. The mob's chants, "Thieves! Thieves!" ringing in Dorothy Jackson's ears as she clutched the makeshift shield of a fallen sign. Her 70-year-old body trembled, her elbow bleeding from the glass bottle's jagged kiss. Soda soaking her coat as Leroy Jackson pulled her toward a service door. His silver hair was matted with sweat, his wire-rimmed glasses askew from the red-capped man's glancing blow. But his deep voice cut through the chaos. "We've got to get out, Dot!" The crowd surged, a wall of rage fueled by Victor Ramsey's lies, their phones flashing like vultures circling a kill. Dot's sharp brown eyes darted, searching for an escape, her mind a storm of defiance and dread. Security guards stood by, their navy uniforms stark against the chaos, one chewing gum, another checking his watch, their indifference a gut punch. Dot realized Victor's influence stretched here too, his bribes turning protectors into spectators. A woman with dyed blonde hair hurled a coffee cup, the lid bursting to splatter Dot's chest, the burn a cruel echo of Megan Carter's stun on the plane. She staggered, her vision blurring, but Leroy's arm steadied her, his tall frame a bulwark as he slammed the service door open. They slipped through, the metal clanging shut, muffling the mob's relentless cries. Dot leaned against the wall, her breath ragged, her arm pulsing with pain as the stench of oil filled the dim maintenance hall. Calvin Hayes burst through moments later, his tweed blazer torn, his salt and pepper beard streaked with sweat. "Dorothy, Leroy, you okay?" he panted, having shoved through the crowd to follow. Dot nodded, her voice hoarse. "Victor did this. Turned them against us." Calvin's eyes darkened, his Chicago drawl thick. "He's a snake. I've got a friend who can leak that memo. Show the world what he's planning." Dot's sharp mind latched onto the lifeline, but sirens wailed outside, a new threat piercing the silence. Leroy peeked through a cracked window, his face hardening. "They've torched the rental car," he said, his voice low. Dot's stomach dropped as flames licked the sky, the mob cheering Victor's handiwork, a literal blaze to match his digital firestorm. A soft click drew Dot's gaze. Tasha Brooks emerged from a shadow, her phone in hand, her young face pale but resolute. "I recorded it all," she whispered, holding up the device, its screen glowing with footage of the mob's assault and Megan's gloating smirk from the sidelines. "Victor's emails, too. He told her to fan the flames." Dot's chest swelled, a spark of hope igniting as she met Tasha's eyes, seeing a courage she hadn't expected. "Get that to Elena," Dot said, her 70 years of grit flaring. "We're hitting back." The hall's gloom couldn't dim her resolve. Victor's mob had drawn blood, but she'd turned their fury into his undoing, a fight that would erupt in a press conference to reclaim her name and WindStar, no matter the cost. The downtown Chicago conference room buzzed with the hum of anticipation, camera shutters snapping as Dorothy Jackson stepped to the podium, her sharp brown eyes blazing beneath the harsh lights. Her 70-year-old frame bore the scars of O'Hare's mob, her elbow bandaged, her coat still faintly sticky from soda. But she stood tall, Leroy Jackson at her side, his silver hair catching the glow, his wire-rimmed glasses polished for the fight. The footage from Tasha Brooks and Calvin Hayes' memo had lit a fire under Elena Torres, their lawyer, who'd arranged this press conference to strike back at Victor Ramsey's smear campaign. Dot clutched a stack of documents, deeds, stock certificates, emails, proof that she and Leroy were WindStar Airlines founders, not the scammers Victor had painted them to be. The room hushed as Dot tapped the mic, her voice cutting through the din like a blade. "I'm Dorothy Jackson, co-owner of WindStar Airlines," she declared, holding up the deeds. "Victor Ramsey's lies end today. We built this company, not him." She slammed the stack down, the thud echoing as gasps rippled through the crowd. A young journalist in a blazer stammered, "You're the owners?" while an older man with a notepad nodded, muttering, "Checks out. I've seen the filings." Dot's chest swelled, her 70 years of grit shining through as she clicked a remote, projecting Tasha's video onto a screen. The mob's fury, Megan Carter's smirk, and Victor's emails ordering the chaos, his words stark. "Keep them grounded. They don't belong at the top." Leroy stepped forward, his deep voice steady. "Victor's a fraud, not us," he said, his glasses glinting as he pointed to the screen. "He's tried to steal what we created because of who we are." The room erupted, reporters shouting questions, phones buzzing as the footage went live, hashtags shifting from WindStar scammers to Victor exposed. Dot's sharp mind tracked every face, some shocked, some skeptical. But she felt the tide turning, the mob's rage from O'Hare fading in her ears, replaced by a murmur of vindication. Calvin Hayes stood in the back, his tweed blazer crisp, a flashing Dot a thumbs up, while Tasha lingered near the door, her young face alight with quiet pride. But the victory shattered with a wail of sirens outside. A dozen cops burst through the doors, their boots pounding, badges flashing as the lead officer, a gaunt man with a scarred cheek, barked, "Dorothy Jackson, Leroy Jackson, you're under arrest for embezzlement. Step away from the mic." Dot's heart slammed, her mind reeling as cuffs snapped onto Leroy's wrists, his glasses slipping with a clatter. The room exploded, cameras flashing, reporters shouting, "Is it true? Did you steal from WindStar?" Dot's knees buckled, her voice rising. "This is insane. What proof do you have?" The cop shoved forged ledgers at her, millions drained, signatures in her name. Lies so blatant they stole her breath, Victor's desperate counterstrike hitting just as she'd reclaimed her name. The Chicago conference room descended into pandemonium. The sharp clack of handcuffs on Leroy Jackson's wrists, a gunshot through Dorothy Jackson's fleeting triumph. Her sharp brown eyes locked onto the forged ledgers thrust into her hands. The numbers, millions supposedly siphoned from WindStar, glaring in black ink, her signature scrawled in a hand she didn't recognize. Her 70-year-old frame trembled, not from weakness, but from the fury of Victor Ramsey's relentless war. His lies now a legal noose tightening around them, just as she'd torn his mask off. Leroy grunted as the cops shoved him toward the door, his silver hair falling into his eyes, his deep voice cutting through. "It's fake. Check the records." But the lead officer sneered. "Tell it to the judge," his scarred cheek twitching as he waved his team on. Dot stumbled after Leroy, her bandaged elbow throbbing, her voice a whip against the chaos. "Call my lawyer now," she shouted, shoving the ledgers at a stunned reporter, who clutched them with wide eyes. The crowd of journalists surged, their shouts. "Did you steal it? Is this a setup?" Drowning out her pleas, cameras capturing every faltering step. Tasha Brooks pushed through, her young face pale, her phone still clutched like a lifeline. "I've got more footage," she whispered to Dot, her voice shaking. "Victor planned this. I'll send it to Elena." Dot nodded, her sharp mind clinging to Tasha's loyalty as a beacon, even as the room spun with betrayal. Elena Torres burst into the fray, her wiry frame cutting through the cops like a blade, her briefcase slamming open to reveal WindStar's pristine financials. "These are forgeries," she barked, thrusting the real records at the lead officer, her voice a whip. "Release them now." The cop's eyes darted over the papers, his frown deepening as the forged ledger's flaws unraveled. Dates off, accounts mismatched. He muttered into his radio, "Stand down," and the cuffs clicked off Leroy's wrists, his glasses retrieved from the floor as he rubbed his arms. Dot exhaled, her legs shaky as she sank into a chair, the room's clamor fading into a stunned hush, reporters scribbling furiously as the narrative shifted again. Calvin Hayes approached, his tweed blazer wrinkled, his salt and pepper beard framing a grim smile. "You dodged that bullet, Dorothy," he said, handing her a water bottle. "But Victor's not done." Dot's sharp eyes narrowed, her mind racing. Victor's arrest ploy had failed, but his desperation screamed of worse to come. She glanced at her phone, a new alert flashing. Their bank accounts frozen, a judge's order stamped with Victor's influence, a gut punch that left them penniless despite their ownership. "He's gutting us," she whispered to Leroy, his hand tightening on hers, his voice low. "We'll fight it." The press conference's victory dissolved into ash, a hollow shell as Victor's shadow loomed larger, his next strike, perhaps a jet sabotaged, waiting to bury them deeper when they flew to confront the board. The small airstrip 30 miles from Chicago shimmered with late afternoon heat as Dorothy Jackson and Leroy Jackson boarded a private WindStar jet, their last stand before facing the board to reclaim their airline. Dot's sharp brown eyes traced the plane's sleek lines, her 70-year-old frame taut beneath a fresh blouse, her bandaged elbow a dull ache from O'Hare's mob. Leroy adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, his silver hair catching the sun, his deep voice low as he murmured, "Victor's cornered. He'll hit hard now." Their bank accounts frozen, Victor Ramsey's press conference smear still viral. Dot clung to the proof from Tasha Brooks and Calvin Hayes, emails and footage tying Victor to the chaos as their shield against his relentless war. The jet's interior was a quiet haven, leather seats, a faint hum of engines. But Dot's chest tightened, the financial gut punch from Chapter 8 a fresh wound. She'd rallied Elena Torres, their lawyer, to dig deeper, and Tasha's latest leak, Megan Carter bragging about Victor's orders, had fueled their resolve to expose him to the board. Calvin had stayed behind in Chicago, promising to rally old Union allies, but Dot's sharp mind buzzed with unease. Victor's reach had already torched their rental car and framed them for embezzlement. A private flight felt like a gamble, even with Marcus, a pilot they'd trusted for years, at the controls. As the jet taxied, Dot settled beside Leroy, his hand brushing hers, a silent anchor. Marcus's voice crackled through the intercom, steady and familiar. "Smooth ride ahead, folks. We'll be in Chicago by dusk." Dot nodded, her eyes drifting to the window, the horizon stretching endless, a fleeting peace she hadn't felt since O'Hare's gate. But 30 minutes in, a shudder rocked the cabin, the engine sputtering with a high-pitched whine. Dot's heart slammed, her sharp eyes darting to Leroy as coffee spilled across his lap, his glasses fogging with steam. "What's happening?" he barked, his voice sharp as the plane lurched, the ground blurring closer through the window. Marcus shouted from the cockpit, his wiry frame hunched over the controls. "Engines failing! Brace yourselves!" Dot gripped Leroy's hand, her voice steady despite the terror clawing her throat. "We're not dying today," she said, her 70 years flashing before her. "Not like this, not now." Alarms blared, the cabin shaking as the jet plunged, trees looming like a death sentence. Dot's mind raced. Victor's sabotage, it had to be. His desperation turning lethal after the press conference's blow. She glanced at Marcus, his hands trembling on the yoke, sweat streaking his face, and a cold realization hit. He wasn't just fighting the plane. "Marcus!" she yelled, her voice cutting through the chaos. "What did he do to you?" His silence was a confession. The jet's descent, a ticking clock on a betrayal she hadn't seen coming. The WindStar jet's cabin trembled violently, the shriek of failing engines piercing Dorothy, Dot Jackson's ears as she clung to Leroy Jackson's hand, her sharp brown eyes locked on the cockpit. Her 70-year-old heart pounded. The plunge toward the Illinois countryside, a nightmare fueled by Victor Ramsey's vendetta. Leroy's silver hair fell into his face, his wire-rimmed glasses fogged as he braced against the seat, his deep voice a growl over the alarms. "Hold on, Dot!" The trees below blurred into a green wall, the jet's nose dipping as Marcus, their trusted pilot, wrestled with the controls, his wiry frame hunched, his silence damning after Dot's shout, "What did he do to you?" Hung unanswered. Then a jolt. The backup system kicked in, engines roaring back to life with a guttural cough. Marcus's voice cracked through the intercom, raw and ragged. "Got it! We're leveling off!" The plane steadied, the horizon tilting back into place, and Dot exhaled, her body shaking as the jet climbed, banking toward a rural strip. Gravel crunched under the wheels as they landed hard, 30 miles from Chicago, the cabin a mess of spilled coffee and shattered calm. Leroy unbuckled, his hands steadying Dot as she stood, her blouse clinging to her sweat-soaked skin, her sharp mind already piecing together the sabotage. Victor's fingerprints invisible but everywhere. They stumbled out into the dusk, the air cold against Dot's bandaged elbow, the jet's wreckage a scar on their survival. Marcus emerged, wiping sweat from his brow, his eyes darting as he muttered. Fuel lines were cut. Someone got to it. Dot's 70 years of grit flared, her voice icy as she grabbed his collar, the fabric twisting in her fist. "You did this, didn't you?" Marcus crumpled, his hands shaking, his whisper a broken confession. "Victor, he blackmailed me. My daughter's sick, hospital bills piling up. He'd pay if I—" Tears streaked his face as he bolted into the woods, vanishing into the shadows, leaving Dot reeling from a betrayal deeper than the mob's glass bottles. Leroy pulled her close, his glasses fogged with the day's toll, his voice low. "We're still here, Dot. That's what matters." She nodded, her sharp eyes tracing the jet's smoking hull. Tasha Brooks' footage and Calvin Hayes' memo, now more vital than ever, proof to bury Victor before he struck again. A pickup truck rumbled up, a local farmer offering a ride back to Chicago, and Dot climbed in, her resolve hardening. Marcus's treachery was Victor's new peak, a near-death plunge meant to silence them before the board meeting. As the truck rolled toward the city, Dot's mind churned. Victor's next move would be bolder, deadlier, likely at the gala where they'd reclaim WindStar, a stage he'd turn into a trap. She whispered to Leroy, "He's not done," her 70 years of defiance aflame unbowed, ready to burn Victor's empire to ash, no matter who else he turned against her. The Chicago Hilton ballroom glittered under chandeliers, a defiant celebration of WindStar Airlines' legacy as Dorothy Jackson stepped onto the stage, her sharp brown eyes sweeping the crowd. Her 70-year-old frame stood proud in a navy dress, her bandaged elbow hidden beneath a sleeve. The jet crash's near-death plunge a fresh scar on her resolve. Leroy Jackson flanked her, his silver hair gleaming, his wire-rimmed glasses sharp against his suit, his deep voice a whisper as they took their places. "Victor's watching, Dot. Stay ready." The board had rallied after Marcus's betrayal, Tasha Brooks's footage, and Calvin Hayes's memo exposing Victor Ramsey's sabotage, and tonight was their moment to reclaim their airline before his lies could bury them deeper. Dot tapped the mic, her voice ringing out, steady and fierce. "This is our airline, built from nothing," she said, the crowd of board members, staff, and loyalists roaring with applause. "No one takes it. Not Victor Ramsey, not anyone." Glasses clinked, chandeliers casting light on faces alight with relief, her ownership reaffirmed after weeks of chaos, O'Hare's mob, the forged ledgers, the jet's sabotaged descent. Tasha stood near the back, her young face glowing with pride, while Calvin mingled with old Union allies, his tweed blazer a familiar anchor. Dot's chest swelled, her 70 years of grit paying off, believing Victor's empire was crumbling under the weight of their truth. Leroy squeezed her hand, his whisper low. "We did it," he said, his glasses catching the light as he smiled, a rare thaw in his stoic calm. Dot nodded, her sharp eyes scanning the room, a rare peace settling in, until a crack split the air, a gunshot ripping through the cheers. Glass shattered behind her, a bullet grazing her shoulder, blood blooming on her navy dress as pain seared through her. She stumbled, Leroy catching her, his glasses flying as chaos erupted, guests screaming, diving under tables, a board member shouting, "Get down!" Dot's sharp mind snapped to focus, her 70 years of battles kicking in as she scanned for the shooter, a shadowy figure bolting through a side door, gone in seconds. Leroy pressed his tie to her wound, his voice urgent. "Stay with me, Dot." Blood soaked her sleeve, the gala a war zone, her victory shot to pieces. Security swarmed, their radios crackling. "Perimeter's clear, he's out." Leaving Dot gasping, her shoulder throbbing as Calvin and Tasha rushed forward. "Victor did this," Dot gritted out, her voice ablade despite the pain, knowing his refusal to lose had turned lethal after the jet's failure. The crowd's cheers morphed into panic, phones flashing as the attack streamed live, Victor's shadow striking at her moment of triumph. She met Leroy's gaze, his jaw tight, and whispered, "He's not stopping," her resolve flaring. Victor's hired gun had drawn blood, but she'd make him pay, a vow that would ignite their final stand. The Chicago Hilton ballroom lay in disarray, the echo of the gunshot still reverberating as Dorothy Dot Jackson clutched her grazed shoulder, blood seeping through Leroy Jackson's tie pressed against her navy dress. Her 70-year-old body trembled, pain radiating from the wound, but her sharp brown eyes burned with a fire unbowed by Victor Ramsey's latest strike. Leroy knelt beside her, his silver hair mussed, his wire-rimmed glasses lost in the chaos, his deep voice a lifeline. "You're okay, Dot. Focus on me." The crowd's screams faded into a dull roar, tables overturned, glass crunching underfoot as security scrambled, their radios buzzing with futile updates. Dot's mind raced. Victor's assassin had fled, but his intent was clear. Silence her before she could cement WindStar's return. Calvin Hayes pushed through the panicked throng, his tweed blazer torn, his salt and pepper beard framing a face pale with shock. "Dorothy, we've got medics coming," he shouted, dropping to her side as Tasha Brooks followed, her young hands shaking as she clutched her phone, tears streaking her cheeks. "I saw him. Dark jacket. Fast," Tasha stammered, her voice cracking. "It's Victor. I know it." Dot nodded, her 70 years of grit flaring as she gritted her teeth against the pain, her sharp mind piecing it together. Victor's jet sabotage had failed, so he'd turned to a bullet, his desperation a rabid beast unleashed after their press conference victory. Paramedics burst in, their voices a blur as they knelt beside Dot, bandages unfurling as they stanched the bleeding, the graze shallow but searing. "You're stable, ma'am. Hospital now," one said. But Dot waved them off, her voice hoarse. Not yet. I'm finishing this. Leroy's hand tightened on hers, his eyes fierce. You're hurt, Dot. Let them help. She met his gaze, her resolve ironclad. He wants me down, Leroy. I won't give him that. The medics hesitated, but Calvin barked, Give her a minute. She's tougher than you know. His Chicago grit mirroring hers. A TV flickered on a nearby wall, Victor's face filling the screen in a live interview, his tailored suit pristine, his voice smooth as venom. They staged it for sympathy. I'm the victim here, he said, his steely eyes glinting as he spun the lie, public doubt surging online. She's faking it. Ramsey's right. Dot's stomach sank, her gala triumph unraveling, the bullet a spark reigniting his smear campaign. Tasha thrust her phone forward, a new video cued, grainy footage of the shooter wiring funds, traced to Victor's offshore account, undeniable proof of his hand. I got this from a friend in security, she whispered. Dot's sharp eyes glinted, her voice a vow. Leak it, Tasha. Bury him. As paramedics lifted her to a stretcher, her shoulder throbbing, she knew Victor's war wasn't over. His next move would strike at Leroy, a trap she'd face head-on when they confronted him and Megan in their final showdown. The employee lounge at O'Hare International Airport buzzed with the hum of vending machines and distant jet engines as Dorothy Jackson stormed through the door, her sharp brown eyes locked on Megan Carter. Her 70-year-old frame ached, her shoulder bandaged from the gala's gunshot, her navy dress swapped for a crisp blouse, but her resolve burned hotter than ever. Leroy Jackson followed, his silver hair catching the fluorescent glow, his wire-rimmed glasses sharp against his suit, his deep voice a whisper. We end this here, Dot. Victor Ramsey's arrest warrant was hours old. Tasha Brooks's leaked video of his hired gun had gone viral. But Dot knew Megan, his pawn, held the key to crushing his network before he could vanish on bail. Megan stood by a vending machine, her blonde ponytail swaying, her smirk sharp as she typed on a tablet, oblivious to the storm closing in. Dot's phone streamed live to Elena Torres' trusted reporter, her voice ringing out. You thought you'd bury us, Megan, but I've got you now. Confess. Megan's head snapped up, her blue eyes narrowing, but Dot hit record, the red dot blinking as she pressed closer. Tell the world how Victor turned you, how he's pulling strings from jail. Her 70 years of grit formed a wall Megan couldn't dodge. The footage from the mob, the jet, the gala, all ammunition Dot wielded with precision. Megan laughed, bitter and shrill, tossing the tablet aside, her voice cutting through the stale air. You think you're untouchable because you're old and black? She spat, her words raw with venom. Victor saw through you. I just finished the job. Dot's chest swelled, the confession streaming to thousands, her sharp eyes glinting as she said, Keep talking. It's over. The video exploded online. She's done, Ramsey toast. A victory Dot could taste, Victor's web cracking under Megan's own words. Employees scattered, a janitor dropping his mop, his eyes wide as he bolted, sensing the tide turning against WindStar's rogue faction. But the lounge door slammed open, and Victor Ramsey burst in, his tailored suit pristine despite his bail release, his steely eyes wild with a cornered predator's rage. Flanked by 3 thugs in leather jackets, their fists clenched, guns glinting at their waists, he barked, Shut it off now! His voice was a growl, Megan scrambling to his side, whimpering. I didn't mean it! He shoved her away, his gaze locking on Dot. You've got guts, he sneered, but sign over WindStar or he's dead. A thug grabbed Leroy, a blade flashing to his throat, blood beading on his skin as Dot froze, her phone slipping, the live stream cutting. Leroy grunted, his deep voice steady. Don't do it, Dot. But Victor's laugh was cold, his hand signaling the thug. Too late. You pushed me, he said, the room shrinking as Dot's sharp mind raced, knowing the showdown was Victor's last stand, and it would cost her everything to win. The O'Hare employee lounge turned into a crucible of chaos, Victor Ramsey's steely eyes boring into Dorothy Dot. Jackson as his thug pressed a blade to Leroy Jackson's throat, a thin line of blood trickling down his neck. Dot's 70-year-old heart hammered, her sharp brown eyes darting between Leroy's strained face, his silver hair matted with sweat, his wire-rimmed glasses fogged, and Victor's cold smirk, his tailored suit a mockery of the violence he wielded. Megan Carter cowered behind him, her blonde ponytail limp, her stammered pleas. "I didn't mean it," lost in the storm. Dot's phone lay on the floor, the live stream dead, but her confession from Megan still echoed online. A spark Victor couldn't extinguish, though he'd burn everything to try. "Sign it," Victor growled, tossing a contract across a table, his voice dripping with triumph as he drew a gun from his jacket, leveling it at Leroy. "Or I shoot him myself." Dot's breath hitched, her shoulder throbbing from the gala's graze, her sharp mind a whirlwind. Outsmarting him was her only play. Leroy's eyes met hers, his deep voice a whisper through gritted teeth. "Don't, Dot. He's finished either way." But the thug tightened his grip, the blade biting deeper, and Dot's resolve wavered, her 70 years of grit clashing with the terror of losing him. She nodded, feigning defeat, her voice trembling. "Give me the papers." Victor's smirk widened, his gun steady as Dot reached for the contract, her fingers brushing the pen. But her sharp eyes caught a glint, a wall panel she'd installed decades ago, a hidden alarm from her days securing WindStar's early hubs. She lunged, slamming her palm against it, the silent pulse summoning security as Victor roared, "Enough!" His thug twisted, but Leroy elbowed him, the blade clattering to the floor, blood streaking his collar. Dot swung a fire extinguisher from the wall, foam spraying into another thug's face, his scream buying seconds as footsteps thundered closer. Security bursting in, tasers crackling as they tackled the hired muscle. Victor's gun skittered across the floor, his steely eyes widening. "No!" But the chaos swallowed him. A thug lunged in the fray, his knife plunging into Leroy's side, blood pooling as he crumpled. Dot's scream tearing through the lounge. "Leroy!" She fell to her knees, her hands pressing his wound, blood soaking her blouse as Victor was wrestled down, cuffs snapping on his wrists, Megan sobbing as she was dragged off. Paramedics rushed in, their voices a blur. "He's alive! Move!" Hauling Leroy to an ambulance, Dot stumbling after, her sharp mind numb, her 70 years of defiance shattered by the cost of victory. Victor's network was exposed, his empire dust. But Leroy's glasses lay broken beside her, his breath shallow, a price she hadn't bargained for. One that would define their final stand as she fought to save him and WindStar in the days ahead. The sterile hum of the Chicago hospital room wrapped around Dorothy Jackson as she sat by Leroy Jackson's bedside, her sharp brown eyes fixed on the slow beep of his heart monitor. Her 70-year-old hands, stained with his blood from the O'Hare Lounge showdown, rested on his, the warmth of his skin a fragile lifeline after Victor Ramsey's thug had plunged a knife into his side. Leroy's silver hair lay matted against the pillow, his wire-rimmed glasses absent, tubes snaking from his arm as he hovered in a haze of sedation. Dot's shoulder ached beneath its bandage. The gala's gunshot a twin wound, but her spirit burned. Victor and Megan Carter were jailed, their empire of lies shattered by Tasha Brooks's footage. Yet the cost weighed heavy, Leroy's shallow breaths a toll she hadn't foreseen. A nurse slipped in, her voice soft as she handed Dot a cracked phone. Leroy's, unlocked in the chaos. "Found this in his pocket," she said, retreating as Dot swiped it open, her sharp mind bracing for what it held. A text thread glowed. "Sold 20% to Delta. Funds for the fight. Trust Dot to win it back." Her breath caught, a secret deal Leroy had struck, betting on her resilience when Victor's war had frozen their accounts. His whisper broke through the fog, faint but steady. "You're stronger, Dot." And her chest caved, tears streaking her face as she realized his sacrifice had fueled their survival, a gamble that had kept WindStar in her hands. The TV flickered on, news blaring Victor's life sentence. Ramsey convicted, WindStar owners vindicated. A hollow victory with Leroy's fate uncertain. Dot's phone buzzed, Elena Torres' voice crisp. "Delta's not suing. They want to partner. You're still in control." Dot's sharp eyes glinted. her 70 years of grit stirring as she squeezed Leroy's hand, whispering, "You were right. We're not done." The board had ousted Victor's allies, but the airline teetered, passengers wary after Megan's hack and the mob's fury. Dot's mind raced. Rebuilding meant more than profits. It meant legacy, a fight Leroy had bled for, one she'd finish for them both. Calvin Hayes slipped in, his tweed blazer crisp, his salt and pepper beard framing a gentle smile. "He's a fighter, Dorothy," he said, setting an old photo on the table. Dot, Leroy, and Calvin, young and fierce in Union gear, a relic of their first battles. "You started this together. He'd want you to keep going." Dot's throat tightened, the photo a spark of their dream, a reminder of why they'd built WindStar, to defy the odds stacked against them. She stood, her resolve hardening, her voice firm. "I'm calling a press conference. One last stand." Leroy's pulse steadied beneath her touch, a silent vow they'd rise again, not just as owners but as symbols of a fight won through blood and unbreakable will. The O'Hare International Airport press room hummed with anticipation as Dorothy Jackson stepped to the podium, her sharp brown eyes sweeping the sea of cameras, her 70-year-old frame unbowed despite the bandages on her shoulder and the weight of Leroy Jackson's hospital bed in her heart. Her crisp blouse replaced the blood-soaked navy dress, her voice steady as she tapped the mic, the echo cutting through the chatter. "WindStar Airlines is ours," she declared, her 70 years of grit a flame that lit the room. "Victor Ramsey tried to bury us. Racism, sabotage, bullets. But we're still standing." Reporters leaned forward, phones buzzing as Tasha Brooks stood at the back, her young face alight with pride, her footage the sword that had felled Victor. Dot held up the old photo Calvin Hayes had given her, Leroy, and Calvin in Union gear, a testament to their beginnings. "We built this airline to lift people up," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "And Leroy bled to keep it ours." She paused, her sharp mind flashing to his hospital bed, his whispered faith. "You're stronger," fueling her now. "He sold part of it to Delta to fight for me, for us. Today I'm announcing a partnership with them. Not a surrender, but a new start." Gasps rippled, a young journalist calling out, "You're keeping control?" Dot nodded, her eyes fierce. "Damn right. WindStar's mine, and it's staying that way." She turned to Tasha, beckoning her forward. "This woman saved us," Dot said, her hand on Tasha's shoulder. "I'm naming her interim CEO. She's earned it with courage Victor couldn't break." Tasha's eyes widened, tears brimming as the crowd erupted, applause thundering. A black woman rising where Victor had fallen, a poetic justice Dot savored. "And one more thing," Dot added, her voice softening. "The Leroy Jackson Fund. Scholarships for those the world tries to ground, because that's who we fight for." The room roared, cameras flashing as Dot's legacy took root, a beacon beyond profit, forged in their shared blood. Later, Dot stood with Leroy at O'Hare's Gate C-12, their first battleground, his arm in a sling, his silver hair catching the light as they boarded a WindStar jet, first class together. Calvin waved from the gate, his tweed blazer a farewell, his old photo now framed in Dot's bag. The plane lifted off, the Chicago skyline fading, and Dot grasped Leroy's hand, his deep voice a whisper. "We made it, Dot." She smiled, her sharp eyes softening, and murmured, "We flew through the storm, love." The jets soared, not into war, but into rest, their empire intact, their fight a light for others, a quiet triumph that echoed louder than Victor's defeat, a love and legacy unbowed, leaving the world below forever changed.